Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to do my book haul revisit for the month of April. This is where I look back at book hauls from the month of April in the past to see how many of the books I have read, how many I would still like to read, how many I have unhauled, and the metric that I'm really using as my sort of accountability to make myself a more conscientious book purchaser is how many books I have unhauled without reading. That is something I want to be very careful about. And I got the idea from Doris from Aldi Books. I will have her channel linked down below. I've seen other people picking up the idea, and that has been really cool to see. Again, it's just a way of making yourself a more accountable book purchaser. I feel like I have learned things about myself. For instance, I tend to listen to nonfiction on audio rather than in print. That's just the way my brain works. So we will get into all of that. And then just a note on process for the sake of timing, because we're going to go all the way back to 2019 to 2024. Actually, we're going to start with 2024 and then we're going to work our way back to 2019. For the sake of timing, I have removed any books that were purchased for my Pulitzer Prize project. I'm trying to read all of the books that have won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. They will not be included here. I am not including any books that were gifted to me. I am not including library builders, which are cases where I wanted to own a copy of like every book by an author, or where I'm building out a collection of an author, like John Steinbeck, Toni Morrison, Louise Erdrich. These are authors that apply for that. Sue Grafton is another. I'm also not including books that I had already read at the time I purchased them, because they were purchased for a very different reason. I knew I liked the book and wanted to have a copy on my shelf. It's different than purchasing a book with the intention to read it at some point. And I think that's everything. Yeah, that covers everything. So let's get going, because I am filming this at the end of my workday and Teddy is restless. You might hear him running around. So I need to finish this video so I can take him for a walk and play with him and do all of that fun to Teddy and me stuff. So let's just dive in. The other note I forgot to mention, I will not be talking about what these books are about in this video. If you want to know what the books are about, you can go to the original book hauls. They will be linked down below. And I will also include links, affiliate links to all of these on bookshop.org, so you can also check out more information that way. April of 2024 is a small one. I have two books that met our criteria. First is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, which has a really beautiful cover that is shiny, so it's a little hard to see in this lighting. And I did just read this in like last month, so I'm really glad I did. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. And it's always fun for me when we start with a success story. So there we go. The other one is Laurie Colwin's Family Happiness, which I have not gotten around to reading yet, but I have amassed a collection of Laurie Colwin books, and I would like to get to at least one of them sometime soon. I feel like there's another candidate that's more likely for me to get to first, but I'm totally fine having this on my shelf until I do get around to it, because this is one of the ones that is most consistently recommended to me, and actually was recommended, I believe, by Ann Patchett herself on her bookstore's Instagram account. So we only have two books. I've read one. I don't even need Google to do the math for me for that one. It's 50%. I have a 50% success rate. And I haven't unhauled any of them. So that's a big fat zero. And I, of course, have not unhauled any without reading, since I haven't unhauled any. So that's another zero. I am also counting metrics for books that I listened to on audio, because I do think it's interesting. I don't particularly find it to be something to watch out for. I don't mind if I purchase a book and end up listening to it on audio, but it is an interesting thing to look at. And because I listened to The Dutch House on audio, it's narrated by Tom Hanks. What was I supposed to do? We have another 50%, 1 out of 2. Let's go back to April of 2023, which is a bit of a larger book haul to revisit. The first one is Arthur and Teddy Are Coming Out by Ryan Love. This was only available in the UK at the time, so Joel and I had pre-ordered it, I believe from Gaze the Word, but it might have been, there's a Queer Lit, which is in Manchester. We pre-ordered it from either one of them, and we both read it in hardcover, and it was really good. It's very cute. So we also start this book haul with a success story, or this book haul revisit for April of 2023 with a success story. Then there's Felix Ever After, which has been consistently on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month since April of 2023, and I haven't gotten to it yet. Maybe this will be the year. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Then we have My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. I did read this one, and I read it in print. I almost got seduced into doing it on audio, and then I realized that there are footnotes in the book, so I wanted to make sure I read it in print. So that is what I did, and we have another success story. Then there is Nettleblack by Nat Reeve. I admit, this sounded really interesting at the time I ordered it from the UK. I had really gotten into a YouTube channel that I actually don't really watch all that much anymore, and because it was recommended by that person, I felt compelled to order myself a copy. I do admit, I don't know if or when I will ever get around to reading this. I definitely felt inspired, and then as time goes on, I'm kind of like, I don't know why I purchased that, because I sometimes will throw it in the mix and think about it when I'm trying to plan what my next read is, and I never feel in the mood. It's been 2 years, so that's not to say I'll never read it, but it doesn't really seem good at this point. I'm not going to unhaul it. I'll hold on to it and see if I get to it. So haven't read it, but it's not unhauled yet. And if I do unhaul it before I read it, that will hit my watch out criteria. But for now, it's totally fine. Then, The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street by Helene Hanff. I found this in a used bookstore in Pullman, Washington, and I read it right away. It's a short little thing, and I had loved 84 Charing Cross Road, so it's sort of a sequel to 84 Charing Cross Road, and for that, it's delightful. The final book that I brought into my library that fits our purposes here is The Beautiful Room is Empty by Edmund White. I have still, after all these years, not read an Edmund White book, and I really need to get around to doing that. And this is a sequel to A Boy's Own Story, so I need to read A Boy's Own Story first. So this would not be the one that I would be getting to first. I don't see any reason to jump to the second book in a trilogy. I also have a nonfiction book by Edmund White called City Boy, and I do have another one, but the name of it is escaping me right now. So I feel like I would read other books. Well, I would definitely read other books by him first. But this is not going anywhere. He's an author that I really would like to get to at some point. So there were 6 books that I brought into my library in April of 2023. I have read 3 of them. Again, I don't need Google to do that math. It's 50%. I read half. And I have not unhauled any yet at this point, so that is a 0. I have not unhauled any without reading, because of course I haven't unhauled any. And I didn't listen to any of them on audio. I read all of these in print. So again, I wouldn't care if I did, but I don't even add anything to that metric. Again, I just find it interesting to follow how many of them I end up reading through audio. So let's go back to April of 2022, another kind of big book haul to revisit. The first, I think this was the last year that I was a member of Book of the Month, and True Biz by Sarah Novick was one of the last books I got from Book of the Month, and I still really want to read it. I see it because it's got this blue cover on my bookshelf all the time, and I think I really want to read that, and yet it hasn't happened yet. It's been 3 years. So someday, hopefully, I will get around to reading this book. I have thought about doing it on audio. Apparently the audio production is really interesting because this is a book that has deaf or hearing impaired protagonists, but I feel like this is something I really want to read in print. So that is likely the way I will do it if and when I get around to doing it. Then there is Devotion by Hannah Kent, which Jen the librarian had talked about, and I immediately wanted to order. Look at this beautiful shimmery cover. Beautiful. I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. I admit the urgency to read it has gone down, but again, because it has this sort of striking cover, I see it all the time on my shelf and think about it. I've heard that it's very sad though, so I'm kind of waiting until I'm in the mood for something sad. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, so it's going to be totally fine hanging out on my bookshelf until I get around to reading it, or until the time I feel like reading something sad. Then we have Brickmakers by Selva Almada and translated from the Spanish by Annie McDermott. I believe this was longlisted, possibly shortlisted for the International Book. No, it wasn't. I just heard about this online somewhere and wanted to get it. So I ordered a copy of the book. I have read it and it's great. It is a really good book. It is sort of like a gay version of Romeo and Juliet, or West Side Story, but don't really go in thinking about that, because what Selva Almada is really doing is exploring toxic masculinity and how a father perpetuating the type of masculinity that he has been taught to, live his life as, causes damage to his children, and then it just kind of proceeds among the generations or along the generations. And I said I wasn't going to talk about what these books are about, but that's what this is about. Really fascinating and interesting, and I would definitely read another book by Selva Almada. Speaking of gay authors I haven't gotten around to reading yet, Colm Tóibín. This is The Blackwater Lightship. I have always said that I think this is the book of his I want to read first, but again, it's kind of sad, so I'm waiting to be in the mood for something like that. And for the reason that I keep waiting to read this book, I'm not getting to any of his other books as well. It's a problem. I'm wondering if I'm going to jump to Brooklyn, because I also want to read Brooklyn and its sequel, Long Island. So I don't know. I don't know where I stand anymore, but I do still really want to read this, possibly in June, when it will be on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, most likely alongside Brooklyn, most likely. We'll see. I haven't worked on that list yet, but it is still to be read. It's not going anywhere. I will be keeping it until I finally manage to read a Colm Tóibín book. Next this is something that was longlisted for the International Booker Prize. It's Love in the Big City by Sang-Young Park. I believe it's translated by Anton Her, but I want to make sure it's not on the cover. Translated from the Korean by Anton Her. I would still really like to read this book, and I haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's not going anywhere. I'm totally fine holding on to this and waiting until I do read it. I believe I ordered this one from the UK because I liked the cover better. No, I think I got this from the US because I liked the cover better. Yeah, one of those weird because everybody always says the UK covers are better. In this case, I think I liked the American version better. I'm assuming this is the American version. I might have this backwards, and if I am backward on this, I apologize. I am misleading you. But I have a version of this, and I'm going to hold on to it until I finally get around to reading it. The final book that I brought into my library in April of 2022 was the winner of the International Booker Prize for that year, Tomb of Sand by Gitanjali Shree, translated by Daisy Rockwell. I've not gotten around to this yet. It's a big book. It's a brick of a book. So at some point, I will get around to it because I want to catch up to this, but the size does feel a little intimidating. How many pages is this? It is in the neighborhood of 733 pages. So not impossible, but it feels like a lot and feels like I'm going to have to be in the mood for it. But I do still want to catch up to it. And I can't remember if I had ordered this at the time it won or if it was just on the short list at the time I ordered it, because I don't remember when the International Booker was announced in 2022. But nevertheless, it's here. It is now available in the United States as well, but I ordered it from the UK. And someday I will get around to it. It's not going anywhere, even though it does take up a lot of real estate in an area where I typically need space. I plan to hold on to this book and wait until I manage to get around to reading it. So there were 6 books that I brought into my library in April of 2022. This one's not good. I've only read one. And that one was Brickmakers. So I have a lot of work to do here. Now, I did use Google for the math here. So according to Google, that is 17% of the 6 books that I brought into my library. And again, not great. I'd like to be doing a little bit better, especially since a certain amount of time has passed since April of 2022. But the good news is I have not unhauled any books, which also means I have not unhauled any without reading. So my watch out criteria is still doing okay. And I read Brickmakers in print, so I didn't listen to any of these on audio. So not bad. There's still 5 books, but I still want to read all of them. And I don't have any plans to unhaul any of them as well. So it's kind of a win, maybe-ish. I don't know. Let's go back to April of 2021. Now, this is an interesting book haul to revisit because I don't have any of the books anymore. That has happened to me before, but let's just get into it. The first one that I brought into my library in April of 2021 was Edinburgh by Alexander Chee. I had really consistently heard great things about Alexander Chee and Edinburgh in particular. So I read it and I threw it across the room when I finished it. It is one of the books that I have tossed across the room in frustration once I finished. So that's not great. But I did read it. And of course, because I read it and tossed it across the room in frustration, you can imagine I unhauled it. I exorcised it from the house like a demon as soon as I was done talking about it in a Friday Reads video or a wrap up. So it's gone. I don't have it anymore, and I'm very happy not to have it here anymore. The next one is Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, which had won the National Book Award for fiction in a bit of a surprise. And I ended up listening to it on audio. So this counts for my sort of interesting metric, which is not a watch out criteria of books I ended up listening to on audio, but I did have a copy of the book. And I thought it was okay, just okay. So I didn't really feel a need to keep it on my bookshelf. So I took it to my local used bookstore and traded it in. So it's not here anymore. And the final one is Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge. I had gotten this from Book of the Month. And I never want to slander Book of the Month because it certainly works for a lot of people. It did not work for me. Basically, I constantly felt pressure to use a credit if I had a credit. And when they released books, I always felt like I needed to choose something. So the problem was not Book of the Month. The problem was me. And I really discovered that when I started doing book haul revisits, because most of the books that I ended up unhauling without reading were books that I had gotten from Book of the Month. And Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge is that is exactly the case. I ended up not reading it. I held on to it for a while and realized that I just didn't have any urgency to read it anymore. So I ended up getting rid of it. It is what it is. So, of the 3 books that I brought into my library in April of 2021, I ended up reading 2. And that's not bad. According to Google, that is 67% of the book haul. I have unhauled. I did this incorrectly, so I'm going to have to fix it. I said I unhauled 1 out of 3. I've unhauled 3 out of 3, which is 100%. But this also means my math at the end is going to be incorrect. So I'm going to make a note down at the bottom for my total unhaul results. And I might have to quickly count how many books I unhauled without reading, because did I count? All right, I counted Liberty in that. So I'm all right with that. So I will have to do a quick math update on books that I unhauled as a percentage of my total book haul, but we're going to be fine. So I unhauled 3 out of 3. Obviously, that's 100. I don't even need Google to fix that math. And I only unhauled one of them without reading Liberty, and that's 33% of this tiny little book haul. And I listened to one of them on audio. That was Interior Chinatown, so 33% of this little book haul. Let's go back to April of 2020 and see how we get on with this one. The first book I read, but I have since unhauled. It's A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell. And I actually did like that book. I thought it was good, but I really needed space in my nonfiction section. So I had to make a tough call. And I just thought to myself, I'm not going to reread this book. Doesn't feel like something I need to have on my shelf forever. So I let it go. And it's not that it was a bad book. It's that I needed space. One of those situations. Then The Enlightenment of the Green Gage Tree by Shikufe Azar. I believe the translator of this book is anonymous for security purposes. Yeah, it just says translated from the Persian. This book was all the rage in 2020. People were reading it and seemed to be loving it. So I ordered it. And interestingly enough, conversation about it very quickly died down. And I still have the book. I'd still like to read it, but I admit, since there aren't so many people talking about it anymore, the urgency has kind of gone away. And that's not really a flaw of the book. It's just something that happens sometimes. But I do still have it. I would still like to read it. Someday I might get around to it. I just have no idea when at this point. But I don't plan to unhaul it for whatever good that does. Then there's Gachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbag. I honestly don't remember if this is translated from Kannada by Srinath Perur. So yes, it is translated. And it's a tiny little thing. So I have read this book. I think I read it in a single day because it is such a tiny little thing. And it was good. If this was a larger book, I might have succumbed to the pressure to make room for other books on my shelf, but it's a tiny little thing. So I don't have a problem keeping it on my shelf. If I really start running into a crisis of space in the neighborhood of the S authors on my bookshelves, there's a possibility that I would get rid of it someday. But for now, I'm totally fine keeping it. And again, it would have to be a major crisis because this does not take up a lot of space at all. Out of curiosity, how many pages is it? It can't be 200. Yeah, it is 118 pages. So it's a tiny little thing. I'll probably have it, at least for a long time. Then we have 2 books that go together. My Brother's Husband, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I don't remember where I heard about these books at this point, but they are delightful. It is manga and it's just fantastic. If you have not read My Brother's Husband by Gengoro Tagame, and I'm willing to bet that there's a translator on this, let's find out. Translated from the Japanese by Anne Ishii. It is fantastic. You definitely need both because I thought I would try Volume 1 and see if I liked it enough to read Volume 2, but really these are one book in 2 volumes. So you need Volume 2 to finish the story in Volume 1. So I read it very quickly because, graphic novels, it reads very quickly. So I read it immediately after getting it, after I had ordered it from a bookstore and immediately needed Volume 2. So I ordered it and it came quickly enough that both of them ended up in my April book haul. But I've read both and they are fantastic. Then we have The Man Who Loved Children by Christina Stead. I have always heard good things about this book. So this is kind of like a library builder. I did not have immediate intentions to get it or read it in April 2020. Honestly, I ordered it because it was April of 2020, early days of the pandemic and things shutting down and businesses trying to figure out what they were going to do. So I ordered it from a bookstore to show support. And, I'm not entirely surprised that I haven't gotten around to it yet. I would still really like to someday. I consistently hear good things about it. So There were 8 books that I brought into my library in April of 2020. I have read 5. According to Google, that's 63%, which is really good. I always would like the number of books that I have read to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. So this is 63%. I'm okay with that. And I need that because my numbers in other months or years for this book haul revisit haven't been great. I've unhauled 2 of those books. They were... Oh, God, I didn't even talk about the 2. So The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I got that from Book of the Month. I did read it. It was good. I just didn't feel like I was ever going to reread it, so I traded it back in. And Valentine by Elizabeth Wetmore, which was another Book of the Month book. And people kept telling me that I was going to love it, but they said you really need to wait until you're in the right headspace because it is sad and kind of upsetting. So the sad and upsetting put me off enough that eventually I just said, you know what, I can't do this. So those are the 2 books that I unhauled, and I'm sorry I forgot to include them with the rest. And that is 25% of the overall book haul from April of 2020. I unhauled 1 without reading. That was Valentine. But I didn't listen to any of the books that I read on audio, so I have a 0 in that category. The final month that we're going to look back at is April of 2019. Let's do this. I found a hardcover copy of The Accidental Tourist at my library in their used book sale. So I grabbed it, and I, at that point, had only read Breathing Lessons by Ann Tyler, which is the book that won her a Pulitzer Prize for fiction, largely because she was a finalist for the 3rd time for Breathing Lessons. Her 2nd time as a finalist was for The Accidental Tourist. So I have now read Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant and absolutely loved it. I read one of her more recent books recently, her most recent book, actually. And I would like to read The Accidental Tourist before I reread Breathing Lessons for my Pulitzer Prize project. So technically, this is someone who is part of my Pulitzer Prize project, so I don't actually have to count her in here, but I didn't think of that until just this moment when I was explaining why or what my process for reading this is going to be. So we're just going to keep her in. We're going to keep her in. It's fine. Obviously, it's not going to be going anywhere anyway because Pulitzer Project. Then there is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have not read this yet. I would still really like to. I ended up getting this because I had done a book tag, like a Choose the Year book tag. And this was one of the books that I looked at and it sounded really interesting. And it's not that long, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem to get to at some point. Yeah, it's 183 pages. But clearly, it's been 6 years and I haven't gotten to it yet. But someday. I have faith. Now we get to City Boy by Edmund White, the nonfiction book I was telling you about. This is my life in New York during the 1960s and 70s. I actually was going to read it one year when it was on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, and ended up not, because I read Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran first, and kind of thought to myself, well, I just read one book about the gay underground in New York City in the 70s, so maybe I should diversify my reading and expand somewhere else. And that is the closest I have gotten to reading it, but I would still really like to. Again, Edmund White is a bucket list author for me, so someday I will get around to it. Then there's Attic by Catherine Dunn. This was a completely spontaneous purchase because I had read Geek Love a long time ago, and I had never heard of another book that Catherine Dunn had published. So I saw this in a store and was so agog that I had to purchase a copy of it. And once I got home, I looked up reviews, and the reviews are very mixed to negative. And for that reason, the urgency, like all the wind went out of the sails. Someday I will get to it. I've thought about unhauling it, but it's so tiny. It's a tiny little thing. Let's see how many pages it is. 134-ish. So yeah, should be easy to do once I finally sit down and get to it. But, you know, I don't know when that will be because a lot of negative reviews of this book out there. But I'm kind of curious to try it myself. Then there was Willa and Hesper by Amy Feltman. I just heard about that book on a YouTube channel, and I don't remember which one, and had it sitting on my shelf for a very long time. and never really quite felt like picking it up. And then one day, I think it was last year, I did that kind of try a chapter thing. I started reading the first chapter just to see if it was something that I might want to prioritize. And I thought it was just okay. Didn't really feel like reading more. And I kept it on my shelf for a little bit after that and then decided, you know what? Maybe it's for the best that I just let it go. So I haven't read it, but it's gone. Then there is The Gallery by John Horne Burns. I haven't read it. It's supposed to be a gay classic. Jen the librarian actually did read this and was not a huge fan. So this is kind of a library builder for me. I wanted it in my library because it's sort of described as a forgotten gay classic. So I like having that in my library. Is that shallow? You decide. I don't think so. So I don't know if or when I will ever get around to reading it, but I'm happy having it in my library. It's sort of aspirational reading. Maybe someday I will have time to get to everything. And that would be one of those everything books. And then there was Karamo, My Story of Embracing Purpose, Healing, and Hope by Karamo Brown. Yes, I purchased a book by one of the Queer Eye guys, and I read it. It was okay. So I didn't keep it. There were 7 books that I brought into my library in April of 2019. I've only read 1, and that's not good. You can imagine. It's 14%. Not very good. And the one book was Karamo. It is what it is. I've unhauled 2 books, which is 29%, and one of those was without reading, which is 14%. But I didn't listen to the one book that I read on audio, so we don't meet that criteria. Overall, I brought 32 books into my library in the last few Aprils, and I've read 13 out of 32, which is 41%. Not bad, despite having some years that were big whiffs. I would like that number to be around 50%, and we're kind of around 50%. I have more work to do, but there are a lot of books in here that I would still like to read, so I'm not really going to be bothered by that. Okay, now I actually still have Google open to do math, so I'm changing the number of books that I unhauled because I had made a mistake there. I've unhauled 7 out of that 32, which Google says is 22% if we round up. So 22%. And again, I don't really have a number or criteria for unhauls. It's the unhauls without reading that I want to be careful of. And that is 3 out of 32, which is 9%. And my sort of out of nowhere criteria for myself is that I would like the number of books that I unhaul without reading to be at 50% or less, and 9% is obviously under 15%, so I'm doing okay there. And again, a lot of these books are not going to be going anywhere anytime soon, so I'll be holding on to them. And for the category of books that I listened to on audio instead of reading in print, 2 out of 32, which is 6%. And again, I just keep that metric in because it's interesting, not because it really particularly means anything to me. It might mean something to you, but there it is. So that's how I did in my April book haul for this year. My book haul coming at the end of this month is going to be enormous. It's really big. So it's going to be interesting to see how I get along next year and how that 41% number of books that I have read changes. We'll find out. We'll find out in a year. And obviously stay tuned for my April book haul at the end of this month. So, as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.